Today on the breakdown, we are returning from last week to Hustler Casino Live once again for a second hand with Wesley. That's right. If you listened last week, this is not a repeat. This is not a rerun. We're doing a second hand with Wesley from the same session. This time he's got a new opponent. It's Henry, King Henry. And let me say this. Some of the similar elements from last week are going to play out again this week in interesting ways. We're once again, of course, going to see a six-figure pot because it feels like we always do. It's a cash game. And, all hell's going to break loose. It's just what you want. It's just what the doctor would have ordered were the doctor a horse with human legs, which is like an anti-centaur, right? An anti-centaur, I think is what they call it. It's a centaur that's against other centaurs. It's a horse that hates centaurs, I think. It's like a demographic that you should be aware of when you're, canvassing. Anyway, on the breakdown with Grant Dennison and Jonathan Levy.
I think it's a reverse centaur. Does the reverse centaur have human legs in the back and like strong human arms in the front and walk around like that? Or is it all legs, 4 legs of human legs with a horse top?
I think it's more than just the legs because a centaur doesn't just have horse legs, right? So, but what I was saying was not a reverse centaur. You're talking about a reverse centaur. I was talking about a horse that has human legs, which is different than a reverse centaur. Reverse centaur also has the human abdomen, of course.
So that's a
in
minotaur.
fact, has both abdomens, right? Because you don't know where the heart is in a centaur. It could be the human heart in the chest, could be the horse heart in the horse part of the body, or both. No one really knows.
Isn't that a minotaur? What you described?
It is not. A minotaur is like a big bull, big old bull with a man, fused with a man. Like if a bull and a man had a baby and named him Minotaur, that would be the Minotaur.
I just haven't seen any for a while. Usually at the grocery store I see a couple, but it's been a while since I've seen
even
a
in
minotaur.
Portland. People are like, we don't know if we feel comfortable with you walking in this form of,
especially because you're wielding
dress.
a fiery axe.
If you could put your axe out, sir.
And there's like this weird purple smoke that surrounds you wherever you go, and there's like an evil voice. I don't know. It's weird, and we should be inclusive though. We should let them in the grocery store even because that's what they do.
This is your classic West Coast whole thing, right? Look, as soon as the Minotaur is willing to stop using plastic bags, I will think about allowing him to my grocery store. But until then, forget it.
It sounds like we're like an alt-right podcast right now.
I can't tell which. We're something extreme. That's all I know.
I don't know what we are either. We're just guys having a good time. I don't know. That's like the first Lonely Island song. You ever see that one? Called Just Two Guys.
Having a good time?
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a while, so
yeah.
I've seen it. I don't remember it. Feel free to
put it on
about
like old school before anybody put shit on YouTube, and that got them noticed. I think, and that started the whole like trajectory of their careers, which is interesting. They really made it. Good for them.
Yeah, they made it big time.
Yeah,
just like us, just like the poker guys.
After that Minotaur thing, we're gonna get invited onto, I don't know, Newsmax or something. Anyway,
Kimmel.
This was suggested by the same person that suggested last week's hand, because suggested it as a package. It's Ryan's 7723. So good job suggesting a combo of hands that have a connection. We don't often have breakdown hands that have a connection unless it's like, oh, we've seen these two players play each other before. But this is like Wesley in the same game doing similar stuff, maybe affected by the previous hand. It's possible he's steaming. He has... Like it's a 100-200 game. They added straddle since the last hand. The last hand was played at 100-200. This one has a $400 straddle. Wesley has 2.5 million in front of him. He just like lost that other hand. He's like, I'm going to add $2 million. I'm just going to add $2 million because I'm fucking pissed off.
No one else has anything close to that much in front of them though, right?
No.
So like, there's no reason to have done that.
No.
Right.
It's like Negreanu on season 1 of High Stakes Poker when he bought in for $1 million and everybody else had 100,000.
Yeah. Yeah. He's just flexing, just showing off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine. Whatever. I mean, it's fine to do it. It doesn't matter. Right. This is what it was like, though. So when I used to play Limit Hold'em because I used to be a professional limit hold'em player. I know that sounds crazy now, but back in the day, that was the thing people did, and I did it. And
Were you also
so
a travel agent? Were you a travel agent?
I would have been if they let me in, bastards.
Yeah, it's a cabal. You can't get in.
Yeah, it's rough. So, but like with limit hold'em, you can only win or lose so much in any hand anyway. You can only lose so much. There's a capped amount on how much you can lose at certain casinos, because there's some places where you can, at least it's unlimited once you get heads up. But first of all, in practice against seasoned players, you're never going to go more than 4 or 5 bets on the river, unlimited or not unlimited, right? Because someone's going to stop because they understand what it all means, right?
Yeah.
But even so, in some of these places, it's not unlimited bets when it heads up. But I would see people buy in, in a 20-40 game where, $1,000 is more than enough, to cover 2 times of you getting effectively stacked, losing the maximum. That's 2 hands worth.
Was there no cap on the buy-in then? It would make sense.
There is no cap, right? So sometimes people would buy in for $5,000, $6,000, and I would just be like, I don't know what this is about. Like, it's just so dumb. So dumb. Now we did have a kill. So you could kill the 40-80, but even then, $2,000 is all you need to buy in for max. But people would buy in for way more than that. And I think to like intimidate people or something. I don't know. It was really weird. It's a limit game. How can you intimidate anyone? I don't know.
It just makes it for 2 harder transactions when you buy in and when you cash out.
Exactly. Just takes more time for everybody.
Yeah.
But they feel cool and, good for them.
Yeah. I mean,
anyway.
In no limit, it makes a lot more sense. But of course, if the second biggest stack is 500K, then there's not really a lot of reason for Wesley to have $2.5 million in front of him.
Yeah. If you're Wesley and you know other people have brought $2 million, I guess you could do it to try and goad them into also putting that.
Yeah. It could be like inspiring them
to
be like, oh, we're at this stage of the game now. And then Andy breaks out a bunch from his pocket or something like that.
Yeah. And you're like, Wesley's like, great. I want to be deep with Andy. Like, that's good. And hopefully that's true.
So that's a reason. That's reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah, that is. Also, it's a stream, and it's fun to be able to say on the stream that he's got 2 in it. They may have encouraged him to do it. If he brought $2 million.
They probably did, because then if like he goes all in over somebody who has a 150K stack, they can put on YouTube that it's like a $2.5 million shove. It's like, come on, man. It's a 100K shove.
They lie so much in those titles, the YouTube titles about poker hands, freaking Hustler Casino Live and JhJd Poker, where it's like, it's just not what happened, man. Come on. They do it all the time. I actually, they lie so much that I stopped clicking on a lot of them because I felt like I was going to be disappointed and I didn't want to reward them for lying, so it slowed down my clicking eventually.
Yeah, but that's probably a drop in the bucket compared to the rewards for lying.
Of course. I'm sure it was good for them. They're very successful. Yeah. Whatever.
It's unfortunate that the incentive structure for video creation on like unpaid content apps like YouTube is to essentially hyperbolize everything to the point that it's become a moot point. Everybody knows it's hyperbole, but they're like, but I have to click on the hyperbole in case this time maybe it's true,
And once in a while it is true. Sometimes it's true, which is what makes it's intermittent conditioning, honestly, which is the most effective form, Yeah. Damn it. They got us again. The algorithm always wins. Yeah.
It's just like, obviously the initial structure of it and the algorithm and the way it was set up was flawed to allow for this to now be the way that it is, but it's hard to get out of it now that it's this way.
Dude, people say like, when the robots take over, when do you think that's going to be? Bro, the robots have already taken over. Just look at your feed. You know what I'm saying? You could make that argument, and you could actually sort of.
Yeah. You could make a solid argument based on that.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's not do that right now. Let's talk about poker, big time poker hands. People with way too much money in front of them playing for way too much money because it's a game that they play for this much money. And here we are, 100, 200, 400 straddle. The 200 big blind ante is still on.
Okay.
Pepe, garbage human, gonna limp under the gun with Jack-8 of spades. He's got 362K. We don't care. King
it's only
Henry,
because we call him. Hold on. We call him a garbage human because that's our term for anyone who's in the pot pre-flop, but ultimately doesn't matter to the story of the hand we're telling. It's nothing against Pepe. Just to be clear, it's been a while since we called someone that. I just wanted to clarify.
Okay,
please continue.
Fair. Good to clarify. Still, if somebody wants to make it look bad, they can. Good for them if they do that. It's just another YouTube lie. So, Jack-8 of spades, limps under the gun, whatever. We don't care. It happened. Henry is on the button. King Henry, which I hope he was named by the commentators or somebody else. I hope he didn't come up with that name himself. I really, really hope, because it's a big difference. Yeah. It's a big difference, you know. He's got 421K and 10-8 of diamonds and makes it 2K from the button. Feel very good about this. I think this is a good play.
That's fine.
Yeah. I like having position. I like this hand. Wesley has ungodly sums of money in front of him, and 10K is his bet from the big blind with jacks. What do you think about the sizing? He 5X's the open over the limp.
I think that's totally cool. We have position on Henry anyway. No, Henry's on the button. Never mind. I thought Henry's in the small blind. Henry's on the button. It makes me want to go a little bit bigger, but it probably doesn't really matter. Yeah, 12. But we're so deep, it's sort of immaterial, right? Like Henry's not folding any normal hand here. He's always calling. We get a little more money in when we have a good hand, which is cool. But as long as we're keeping our size the same, what we're really trying to do is knock Pepe out and go heads up against Henry with a good hand that wants to play heads up, right? That's really what's happening here. So I don't know that it matters that much if it's 12K or 10K.
Do you think in this game, at these stack depths in position, Henry has any hands that he makes it 2K and then folds to 10K?
Like maybe a few joke hands, like 7 deuce off, 4 deuce off, something like that. But
Henry doesn't strike me as the guy who does the joke hands.
No, he does. I agree. Maybe once in a while he's isolating Pepe in position with just like a pretty crappy ace, like ace 4 off.
Maybe
ace 6 off, ace 7 off. Maybe he finds a fold with those hands because what are we doing?
Yeah, I think you would.
That's it. But that's it. Even ace 4 off, though, he might call in position once, right? To see what happens. Maybe. And he can make a straight. I don't know. He might even call that. The point is, it's very few hands.
Yeah. So this is just like linear value from Wesley.
I think so.
Yeah. So Pepe folds and Henry calls.
Yep.
Henry could 3-bet or 4-bet, but I don't see why. It's a nice
loading
hand.
The pot with this hand when, like we don't want the pot to get so big with this hand, right? We want to keep it small-ish and only blow it later if we have reason to, I think.
I mean, the reason to do it, the reason to do it is metagame and balance, right? Like you want to be able to show up with every board has to be scary to your opponent in every game theory iteration that you present pre-flop.
Of course. But having 10-8 is not something you generally are going to be 4-betting with versus when you don't have a blocker. Like you'd way rather be doing this with ace 7 suited or ace 8 suited. So you can still have an 8 in your hand, but now you've got the ace, so you're blocking ace king and aces and ace queen. And you know, there's a lot better things that can happen. You can make the nut flush, like as opposed to 10-8.
That's true, but I will argue the other side a little bit that in this game, it's going to be rare to see a 5-bet from Wesley. So we're going to the flop a lot of the time, or he's folding. Yeah. And this hand flops better against his continuing range than ace 8.
That is fair. I will say the other reason to do it is initiative is really powerful in poker, right? If you're the guy who put in the last bet pre-flop, once in a while the guy's trapping you with aces or kings and just calls, right? But mostly, if you keep firing, it's very hard for them to keep calling, right? Like they can call the flop, they can call flop turn. It's really hard to call 3 barrels. Now, I don't know that Henry's going to have a huge amount of 3-barrel bluffs after he 4-bets here with 10-8 suited. I don't know if he is. A lot of people give up after flop or turn because it's hard to keep firing. But it's really hard to be in the other seat and keep calling. It's really, really, really hard. And so if someone's got the heart to fire away a lot, now they hopefully learn to trap people who are going to, just triple barrel bluff all the time. But it's you find yourself in all these super tough positions. I've been that guy where I'm like, I'm calling down no matter what. And then you get to the river and you're like, well, geez, there's 3 to a flush, there's 4 to a straight, there's an overcard, there's this. And the guy just bet $1 million. What am I supposed to do here? And suddenly your great plan, it's very hard to follow through. And when you do, you lose a lot, and it's just tough. So there is a real value just in being the initiator, or having, the last guy to strike, basically, and force Wesley to become passive with his hand. And it's not, by the way, a big deal to lose, to get blown off the hand with 10-8 anyway. If somehow Wesley puts in a 5-bet, we can fold 10-8 suited. It wasn't that big a deal, right?
It didn't go well.
Those are all really good points, Yeah.
That said, calling is totally fine. We have position. It's a nice hand. That's what Henry does.
That's the standard play,
Yeah. He makes the call. The pot is $21,100, which is bigger than any cash game pot I've ever been involved in. And that was pre-flop. So that's just the type of game we're playing here.
For sure.
the flop is 10 of hearts, 6 of spades, 3 of diamonds. So Henry flops top pair with some backdoors. Wesley flops an overpair on a dry board that feels very safe for jacks.
It feels safe, but at the same, I mean, obviously, I mean, it's weird whenever we talk about like, well, people have all the sets, right? Like, yeah, okay, like anytime someone calls a raise, they can have like anything, any cards lower than a 10, they can have all sets beyond that, right?
Yeah.
But this is one of those spots where Henry absolutely can have all 3 sets, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, but besides
also
that,
has,
I think, yeah,
he has like suited 10s. He has some suited 6s.
of course.
He's got
this was a good flop.
A lot of whiffs.
Yeah, I'm agreeing. I'm agreeing. Like,
yeah,
this is a great flop for Wesley for sure.
Wesley's going to bet 10K.
Okay.
Which is like about half pot. That seems fine to me. I think on this drive aboard as the 3 better, we could go smaller even. Like just as a general rule, we could go like 7K, 8K would be fine. What do you think?
I mean, being as deep as we are, I'm inclined to go a little bigger. So that way we can threaten bigger bets later, define the hand a little bit more now. I think there's value to both of those things as we're so deep and we're out of position. So I think I want to go a little bigger, but I don't think it matters that much either. I think it's perfectly fine to go 8. I think it's fine to go 10. I think it's fine to go 12. You know?
Yeah. Do you think there is any argument for Henry turning the dial back to 2003 and raising here?
Wow. There's got to be some argument for it, right?
Yeah.
If we want to have raises, we don't have that many natural raises here, right? We have some straight draws and we have some 1 pair hands, and that's it. I guess the only question I'd really have with this one, and this is, I guess, why you said 2003 when people just raised top pair no matter what, is like if we're raising this, I mean, we're not really turning our hand into a bluff. We're just denying equity, I guess. Is that what we're doing when we raise this hand?
I mean, it kind of, I think when we're this deep, it can kind of be both. Yeah. You know, like we are denying the equity against hands like king, queen, ace, king, ace, queen, stuff like that. That's nice. That's a nice result. If those hands fold, that's a plus EV result. But at the same point, we do start to tell a story. Now, it's possible that we just can't have raises on this board because if we're only raising sets and straight draws, that might not be quite enough to get paid with the sets. I'm not sure.
We can have a little more value, but that doesn't help that's still the same problem.
Yeah.
Right. We can have like 6-3 suited, I guess. There's 2 combos of that, but that doesn't help at all. That's the opposite of the problem.
Yeah.
Right? We need to have more bluffs. I think we'd be turning a hand like 3-4 suited into a bluff makes more sense than turning 10-8 suited into a bluff.
I agree. I was actually thinking like ace 3 of spades or hearts is maybe the best bluff hand here. Yeah. So we have the backdoor nut flush draws, and we have the 2 pair draw basically, or trips draw, and
I think
at the 10 is too powerful. The 10 is too powerful to turn into a bluff.
We're like just winning too much at the time
to deny equity. I just like, and this is not like how I play, but I like to explore these ideas.
Yeah,
in
of
spots
course,
like this, especially when we're this deep. I think we could turn some 6s into a bluff too if we want to expand on it a little bit. You know, because
our weakest 6s we could consider, I guess, because it's that have like backdoor stuff, like
the hands with nominal showdown value that are going to be hard to hold on with. Maybe we can take the initiative with those hands. You know, like the 3s and the 6s.
I assume our plan is if we call the flop with the 10, we're calling most turns. There may be a few turns we decide, like maybe an ace ace of non-diamonds we let go of because like what are we beating now? Like there's not much. There's some things, sure, he could be bluffing here and there, but mostly we're screwed, right? Yeah. But I would think almost every other card we're just continuing with the 10 anyway. So yeah, that's a reason because we need to have some calls in our bucket here, right? Hands that we can go call with. The 10 is probably the best, most obvious one for that.
Yeah. It makes lots of sense. The problem is that it is sort of face up, you know, if we go call, unless we're tricky and balancing with sets and stuff sometimes, and maybe pocket aces, hands like that.
It also matters what the turn card is, you know, like how face up it is, you know, like if a 7 comes and we call, now we can have straights, we can have 2 pairs, we can have 10s, we can have lots of stuff. But if a king comes, I mean, we mostly just have a 10. We don't really have any naked kings there, right?
Yeah. Sometimes we have king 10.
Yeah, that's it.
So Henry goes with the normal plan and calls, which
Sure.
I condone. I think that's the right play. I think it's a bit too ambitious and too fancy to try to like do some sort of mergy equity denial / set up future bluff thing with a 10. I think it makes sense with a hand like ace 3 suited when we have the backdoor nut flush draw to go with it.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the perfect hand for it.
I think if we were going to raise a 10, we'd probably want to be raising the best 10, like ace 10 at least. So that way there are hands that Wesley could call us with that we're beating, i.e. other 10s, which is not, it's possible Wesley could have jack 10 suited, queen 10 suited, king 10 suited, have put in this 3-bet, right? And even if he has ace 10, now we're chopping. Of course, there's overpairs. Of course, there's problems, but we cut down on more of the stuff. With the ace in our hand, we also block aces, which is useful too, a little bit, right? So it's just a little bit better if we're going to do it. That's for value.
Either way,
of course.
Henry goes normal and he calls.
That's cool.
Pot is $41,100. The turn does help Henry. It is the 9 of clubs. He really wishes it was a 9 of diamonds. That would be nice, but he does now pick up 4 additional outs. Straight draw comes in for him. It's a somewhat scary card for Wesley, for sure, because 10-9 gets there, 7-8 suited gets there. 10-9 is going to be suited too. It's really just those hands. Maybe Henry shows up with 6-9 suited. If he's going to play, like if he makes it 2K pre-flop, he's probably going to call the 10K, right? It's because it's suited and can make straights and stuff.
I think so.
So he's got to worry about 10-9 suited, 7-8 suited, and 9-6 suited. I don't think anything else, right?
No, I don't think so. I think that's it.
So is that enough to check? Like, is that enough scary hands to check, or do we want to keep building a pot?
Bet. I think we should absolutely bet. We have a strong hand on this board. Yes, we are beat by some 2-pair combos, but we can target every 10 except for 10-9, basically, which are hands that make a lot of sense. Henry having like ace 10 suited here is something we should absolutely be targeting for 3 streets of value right now. To give up on that by checking, I think is a huge mistake. We're deep enough. Henry may check back some of these hands because he doesn't want to put himself in a weird spot. He might bet for value too, but he might not. And why not just go bet with a good hand in this good spot? So sure, once in a while it's bad for us. We'll figure that out when we get there. Henry will raise sometimes and we'll know it, right? We'll be like, oh, this is no longer a great situation. Maybe we should fold. But until then, I don't know why we're not going to continue betting here.
That's what Wesley does. He bets 20K. So he goes half pot again.
Okay. Yeah, it feels like he's really targeting like queen 10 suited when he does that.
Yeah. I think this is a more reasonable spot to discuss a raise for Henry. And at this point, it would be a lot less weighted towards equity denial and a lot more weighted towards the bluff. There's a little bit of equity to deny, although Wesley's probably not going to continue that much with like ace, king, ace, queen anymore. Like maybe if he has king, jack, or queen, jack, which I'm not so sure he was going to 3-bet pre-flop in that situation in the first place. Those are hands he might continue with that we could try to deny equity to, but they aren't here as often as ace, king, ace, queen in hands like that. Yeah. So it's more about trying to make it very scary for when Wesley has us beat, such as this moment right here, because we block 7-8, we could have 7-8, and we have the additional outs that were provided by the 9. Yeah. I think it's an interesting play to raise here because it feels like we're often losing. When
he bets again, now every bet that's for value is now we're definitely losing to, right? That wasn't necessarily true on the flop. Wesley could have been betting smaller pairs, ace 8 or something like that, middle pair, top kicker, something like that.
Ace 6.
Oh, sorry. You are correct. We have an 8 in our hand. Ace 6. Pocket 5s, whatever. He could be betting something like that. Now he's very unlikely to bet those again for half pot. I agree. It feels like we're losing a lot. Now we do have reasonable equity to just call in position, but I agree. It's a really interesting idea to raise right now, where especially when we're blocking the nuts, we have outs to a really strong hand, and we block top set. We block lots of stuff we want to block here. It's not if somehow Wesley has ace queen, I don't know that he's going to fire away again on the river, and I don't know that we want him to because it's going to be hard to call.
If a deuce comes in, he fires 75% of pot. Are we really going to call with one of our worst 10s?
So we could be the guys to put in this is actually a classic limit hold'em play. We're talking about limit hold'em here on this show for some reason, twice now. We're on the turn when you had a showdownable hand, raising the turn in position to get the quote free river play, so you deny equity from the hands that have overcards. And if the guy's got you beat, well, he was probably going to bet the river anyway, and you probably were going to call. So it costs you nothing in your mind to get there. And if you somehow improve on the river, you get to put in another bet.
I mean, you might
it's a
end
little
up
bit like
bluffing it depends on the feel that Henry gets from the situation, but he might get called and decide he has to bluff the river anyway.
Yes, depending on what the river is.
That way it's not a free river, because sometimes you get heroed and you lose an extra 6 figures.
Correct.
Yeah.
But like one thing, but we could decide with top pair right now to raise and just put no more money in unless we improve. Like if we get called, we could be like, all right, like that didn't work, I'm done. Yeah. Or we could decide, he hung on, but like we're deep and I can still have the straight. I block the straight. He has a lot of overpairs here. Like I'm going to keep attacking. And that sounds more reasonable to me, actually. If we raise, I think we should mostly be planning on firing a lot of rivers. Like, right? Like usually a raise will work now, but if it doesn't, we can still target all the overpairs on the river. What are they supposed to do unless they improve in some good way or block something important, right?
This is one of those spots where if you trust your live reads, it can be extremely helpful. Like if you raise and then you decide based on what you see from your opponent, if they call, like if it's worth going for it on the river, like what type of quality of hand they have, sometimes that can tilt one way or the other. Now I have no idea.
I so wish I had live reads like you did. You're so much better at live reads than me, and I hate that how you're so much more certain. Now, maybe you're wrong more than you know, because if you fold, who knows? But you're so confident in your live reads compared to my level of confidence in my live reads. And I think that's appropriate. Like you are good. You've always been good at reading me, for example, at least back in the day. And I think you are good at reading other people. And I think I am fair at best at that, like I'm not saying I have no skills there, but like way, I'm like a toddler compared to you with that stuff. And I would love that skill. In fact, we're going to, at some point, do something where you teach me how to do it and we'll film it. I don't know.
I mean, the key for me, I'm just going to give this away. It's not that important.
Even better. We're filming it now.
If you still can't figure it out, then I think it's body language. It's not the eyes. Sunglasses don't matter. It's not going to help. Yeah. It's not the heart rate, because you need a huge amount of data to know what the heart rate means. It's body language, and it's mostly in the shoulders and the hands. It's the stiff
shoulders.
And that's why pros are all really good with their hands. They keep their hands the same and stiff, but the hands can display levels of comfort. Some people have no ability to look not tense in the shoulders when they're uncomfortable. And I don't know how to explain what that looks like, but I just know it. I just know it when I see it.
I will say, so when I was playing, this is like 2018, but I was playing the Monster Stack, the Millionaire Maker, one of those two. And it was like day 2, and our friend had won the Monster Stack like the year before or 2 years before, whatever it was. And one of the things he had said was he was never on his phone the whole time. He just watched the action 100% of the time, the entire tournament, a 5-day tournament, right? And I was like, I'm going to do that. And I got all excited. And the first thing I noticed was no one else at my table was doing it. Even though I had like Dan O'Brien on my left and other famous people were playing with me. Everyone else was on their phone or their tablet. No one. So I was like, I'm already have a chance to get information no one else is getting. Like I was already excited about that. But then like someone would make a big bet on the river and have to wait while the other person thought. And so I would often watch that person because I'm like, let's see what you look like. Maybe I'll get a showdown and I'll get a feel for this. And sometimes I would just watch them like, dude, that guy is freaking out. Like I just like the way they're holding themselves. It feels like there's just a lot going on underneath right now, And I would guess that's a bluff. It doesn't have to be, but I would guess that's a bluff, and just like deciding to really pay attention fully the entire time was, I don't know how helpful it was. I didn't necessarily have that many live reads I used in that event, but it still was helpful to me. I cold 4-bet with, like a bad hand once or twice based on all my paying attention. I was like, oh, these guys are always raising and re-raising these spots. I don't need to have a hand here to steal everything, And I went all in once with 35 blinds just because with nothing, because I thought they didn't have it, and it worked like a charm, And that was because I was paying attention. So there's so much value in that. And if you can combine that with what Grant's talking about, right? Really knowing what parts of the body to be even looking at. The shoulders is a good tip. I'm going to really try and pay attention to that. I love that. Like you could be super powerful, like be able to make those marginal decisions in big spots where you're like, he's got it, or or he's very uncomfortable. And that's, one big call or one big fold changes your whole night a lot of the time.
Yeah. And to be clear, these are not used to make entire decisions. It's like if there's a close decision, you can you can make a decision based on this, but you should lean way more into theory and like your understanding of the betting patterns and what they mean from like bet sizing stuff from amateur players is way more valuable than body language.
It's incredible how good that is.
Yeah. That's why I like just a quick further note on this. That's something that I really don't like about the way Portland has its game set up. It's good for the games. We have these things called lockouts, which are like these 5-card PLO high games where all the equities run super close together and nobody really bluffs in the games. It's just about like which little thin value marginal difference wins. And a lot of times we end up in like a 51-49 on the flop type spot. So I don't get any of that in that part of the game, which is always the biggest pots because we're playing at way too big of stakes in that part of the game. And like, but there's no live reads to be had. Everybody's just kind of confused and trying to figure out like, should I gamble here?
And you're playing pot limit also, right?
Yeah.
So that means it's harder to get sizing tells. I mean, there could be some for sure. Like people may sometimes go pot with some type of hands and half pot with others, but like the good players, like there's no overbetting anyway. Like they just go probably bet. I would assume they're betting the same percentage of the pot, usually 100% when they're betting. So you lose all that information right away. And if they're doing that, then probably a lot of the amateurs are copying that because it's such an obvious thing to copy when people say pot all the time, right?
Yeah, and the SPR is always insanely bad in those games, so there's not like a lot of nuance to it. But it's great for the game because it juices the game. Lots more money ends up on the table. That's a quick note, but done with that.
Cool.
Moving on.
Back to the hand.
Henry does not raise the turn. To recap, it's 10-6-3-9 rainbow. Henry has 10-8 of diamonds. Wesley has jacks, and Wesley bet the flop and the turn. Henry decides not to raise the turn, which I think is a totally normal decision that most people would make. I do think now is a better time to raise than the flop, though, if he was going to make an unusual raise. And I think it would actually be probably the slightly superior play. But it's close. Yeah. It's close.
I mean, having the blocker to 7-8, even though it's like Wesley shouldn't have 7-8 too often, he 3-bet from the big blind, he's going to show up with 7-8 sometimes. Like, so blocking that is pretty great, I think.
Yeah.
And of course, drawing to that straight is good. And you're drawing to a bunch of cards. If any of them come in, also, it's hard to get paid. So I like a raise right now. I think that's pretty neat. I agree. I probably wouldn't have thought of that. I probably would mostly just call there because it seems so natural to call in that spot. But if we're going to struggle to call on the river with our hand, raising the turn when you've got blockers and appropriate blockers is kind of a cool play.
Yeah.
I dig it.
Anyway, we got 81K in the pot now. And the river is a bailout card for Henry. It's the 8 of clubs. He makes
Beautiful.
2 pair.
Yes.
A 7 is a straight now, but there aren't that many 7s in Wesley's range. Queen Jack is a straight now, but there's not that much Queen Jack in Wesley's range either.
Yeah.
So this is just a bad card for Wesley. It's just a categorically bad card. The only good thing about it is that he has 2 blockers to the nuts with jacks because Queen Jack is the nuts. Yeah. So it's hard to imagine Henry having Queen Jack though. Maybe he has Queen Jack with the backdoor flush draw. Maybe.
That's what he has. That's the only way he has it. Yeah.
And let's see, which jacks does Wesley have? Diamonds and clubs. There is a diamond and not a club on the flop. So
okay, so he blocks. So there's only
There's 2 combos.
There's only one. Yeah, there's 2 combos left. Right. Spades and hearts. You could in theory have that. Okay.
Right. So and I don't think Henry would have the non-spade hearts Queen Jack if he even has those.
Mm-hmm.
So
Henry can have 2 7s though. Even though it's not the nuts, he definitely could have that.
Or 10-7 or 6-7.
Sure, but 2 7s makes more sense, right, than those hands. Right. Even though since he's showing up with 10-8, he can obviously have those other things too.
Or 7-8, of course, which was the nuts on the turn and decided not to raise. It was a rainbow turn card, so he might feel like he's not going to raise that very much. I don't know.
Maybe.
He didn't with the hand that he had, although more typical. Wesley checks. I get it. This is a bad card.
Yeah. It's time to check. And, you sit there, you're like, if it goes check, check, I win most of the time. It'd be weird to lose if it goes check, check. If he bets, we'll make some decisions, All
right. If you're Henry, are you betting? And if so, how much?
We're definitely betting as Henry. We should be targeting over pairs. Wesley rarely has the 7 in his hand, especially the way he's played it. He rarely has this beat the way he's just played this, right? Where he went 3-bet, check. That's a hand that's either just going to insta-fold or be an overpair. But we should target overpairs right now. I don't think we can bet a crazy amount, right? Because like, what are we supposed to have that bricked out at this point? It's hard. We'd have to be turning one pair into a bluff, right? That's the only way to have a bad hand here.
Yeah, so I guess that you just give him a really good price and hope he's like, well, I don't see how I'm possibly winning, but I'm winning enough to make the call type of thing. Because
I think we need to make it look like we're betting ace 10 for value somehow. And that he's
I don't know. I don't believe that we would ever do that.
I don't either.
And there's no
yeah.
There's no miss flush draw. Multiple straights came in. It's kind of weird. Like, I definitely understand that it feels like we're winning most of the time, but I don't think an overpair should call almost any size.
Yeah. I mean, the 4-5 came in, like you said, 7-8 came in. Now we have 7-8-9 on the board, which we don't have much queen jack. We have a tiny bit of queen jack though too, which came in. Yeah.
10-7, 6-7.
I mean, I guess it comes down to if Wesley's going to be a bit of a station, then we should bet, right? If he's going to overcall with his range in this spot, we should bet. If he's going to overfold or raise, my God, sometimes we should just check back, right? If he's going to fold the appropriate amount of the time, we probably should check because it's so hard to get
unless
value.
We want to call a raise. Unless we think that, like, yeah.
That's fair enough. That's an interesting move and something to talk about. But if we think he's got essentially not enough calls here, then I guess we can just check back. It feels weak to check back, though. It feels like there should be value to be had. Is there a way to scratch any value out of this? What could we have that aces or queens or tens or what? Not tens, sorry, kings could call here and beat? Because I agree. I don't think we're ever betting just a 10.
And there aren't any natural bluffs left for Henry. Like, the only natural bluff left is king jack suited with the back door.
He could have ace 8 suited with the back door, I guess.
And turn the pair into the bluff?
Yes. He could be doing that maybe even with a hand like, nope, not ace, maybe ace 9 with the back door, same kind of a thing, backdoor flush, turns the 9, check. He definitely feels he has to call. It checks to him, and now he doesn't need to turn it into a bluff, though. What does he really need to turn these one pair of hands into bluffs? I don't think he does. Especially like the better one. You'd think so? 9s and 8s?
I think Wesley with this line pretty much never shows up with ace king or ace queen.
You think he's either giving up on the turn or betting the river with those with those kinds of hands?
Like
yeah, you might be right. This is a scary river. Wesley can still have a 7 or queen jack. It's not impossible. So yeah, maybe you're right. Okay, well, if that's the case, if he can't show up with those kinds of hands, I mean, those hands weren't going to call us anyway. Can we get called by aces? Okay, let's just figure that out right now. If we have 2 pair, can we ever get called by aces if we bet how big? 81,000 in the pot. If we bet a quarter pot, we bet 20,000. Will aces call?
Maybe aces can, like, if I were in Wesley's seat, it would be entirely dependent on what I thought of my opponent.
Yeah, I have an idea. But you go. Okay. Finish first.
If it was like a pro that I respected, I would probably fold for 20K because I'd be like, this player is probably putting me on an overpair, and I think they're trying to do exactly this thing and make sure that I call with an overpair. And I don't think they're ever doing it with ace 10 because they know that, like, it's too risky. They're giving me too good of a price, you know? But if it was like a kind of player who didn't really know much at all, then I would definitely just lean into the price and call.
I think that's fair. Could we bet 10,000 into 81 and humiliate him into either a call or a raise?
I like that.
Do that. I like that too.
That's a play that I make a fair amount of the time.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Like maybe even like 8,000.
Okay.
Like something 10%. That like we just have to snap call no matter what size he raises to. We just have to. Right.
Yeah. And I guess if he goes all in, we can think about it. But essentially any kind of even big size raise, we're calling instantly because we engendered this, right?
Actually, we shouldn't snap for future usage of the same thing happening again, which I've made that mistake before where I make a play like that and I do snap and I win and I'm like, fuck, why did I snap call? That was stupid as shit.
You know what I've done sometimes is I like a guy, this happened, this is a number of years ago now. I still remember this. A guy went all in on the turn. I had an overpair and nothing else. And I started talking to him and he said something. And as soon as he said the thing that gave it, I'm like, call. And I realized later, I'm like, why would I call instantly after he says that? Like, it's so obvious that I got something off that. Like, don't do that. Yeah. Make it, like, think for another 30 seconds. Then the rest of the table doesn't pick up on it, and he doesn't pick up on it. Like, what are you doing, dummy?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Sometimes in poker, it's hard when you have like a plan that you think is kind of cool to not like kind of be show offy about it, I guess.
I think that's right. I think the Insta call is like, look how cool I am. I'm the sweet one. I'm the fancy boy. Yeah. And that's an ego thing that I think we all get caught up in for sure, but it costs us money.
Yep. Big mistake.
If you agonize over that outwardly, you're going to get so many more people so many more of the good players are going to attack that in the future. Even if you make the call, they're going like, oh man, I just have to size up a little more. Or he almost folded that hand because with that, oh my God, like I got to attack him more, and you like really set that up beautifully.
Yeah. I fucked up.
Yeah. It happens.
Anyway, Henry decides that he does need to go for value. I understand it feels like you're always winning. I'm just concerned about the outcomes. And this, like, if Wesley is a different player, Wesley's like a tricky guy who thinks pretty well. If Wesley's one of the major fish on Hustler Casino Live, I think we should definitely go for value and expect them to call with an overpair and think
Mike
nothing
X.
of it.
We're going after Mike X is there. We 100% bet like 3/4 pot, and he calls with aces a lot, I think. Yeah.
Wesley's not that guy, which is a bit concerning to me. Henry goes a bit bigger than the 20% that you said. He goes 25K.
Still really small though. It's like 30%.
It is. I like the idea of the 8 to 10K better though.
Me too. It's a better play.
I think that the outcomes are just better.
Well, we have a clearer plan, right? We have a very clear plan in that case. This is going to be tougher if Wesley doesn't do one of the two obvious outcomes, which he does not because it's a breakdown hand.
This is evidence for all of this. Wesley obviously uncomfortable with this spot, even though the price is good. Like jacks aren't beating value. Henry's a good player. He's not doing this with Queen 10. He's just not, right?
Oh, no way.
So Wesley knows that he's losing pretty much every time.
Yeah.
The question is, how good is Henry's hand? And I guess Wesley can recognize that it's very unlikely that it is super good because Wesley blocks the nuts and Henry only has 2 combos of the nuts remaining. The problem is that Henry has a lot of 7s in his range. He has pocket 7s, he has 9-7, he has 8-7, he has 10-7, he has 6-7. All the suited varieties of all of those, I think.
It's not impossible, by the way, that Henry has other combos of Queen Jack than just the suited ones. Right? He can't call the flop. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Never mind. I got there. I just needed a second. Okay. Continue.
So I think if Wesley's going to turn this hand into a bluff, I think it's a little bit too ambitious and leaning a little bit too much into just the words on paper that he has good blockers to the nuts, right? Yeah. Like it's overvaluing that idea because this isn't a spot where that idea is as valuable as it is in other spots.
I think part of it is we have the blockers, which is tasty. I think part of it is just the size that Henry bets makes Wesley thinks he can attack that successfully, right? It feels like a weaker part of Henry's range is betting because if he had a stronger part, he could target a stronger part of our range. He's not doing that, right? He's clearly targeting overpairs like we have. And good for Wesley to realize that means his hand is no good. I agree with you. This feels overly fancy, and I would be worried as Wesley about my reputation too. Like last week's hand is Wesley doing the same play, literally check raising the river to the same amount, 125 it is a bluff. It's a hand that was good, but then turns into a bluff, right?
Well, we didn't tell the audience yet that he raises to 125, but I guess we did now.
Well, I sort of implied it like a minute ago anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good. That Wesley raises to 125K. So I would be worried as Wesley that my image is not right for this also. On top of, this feels like a little overly fancy and like a little too much against a guy who might just decide to station us because we're Wesley. And he doesn't want it to say, he doesn't want to fold and have us turn over our hand and say, art, it's art. Like, I think you get more calls because of that stuff. People like, they don't want to be humiliated. No one likes that.
So he makes it 125. Is this a good play or not?
I don't like it. I think we should just fold. I think folding is a better play than making it 125, even though against the actual hand that Henry has, this is almost best case scenario, right? This is only a few pips better than our actual hand as Wesley, right? I know, sure, there's overpairs, but like Henry has almost none of those. Of the hands that Henry can actually have, 2 pair is like kind of what we're hoping for. That's what we're attacking here. So it's got a good chance to work out, but I do not like it as a play. If Henry has a 7, he's not fucking folding. I just don't believe he's going to fold.
That's my problem with the play, is that this is why I'm saying he's leaning too heavily into blocking the nuts, right? Like, who cares if he blocks the nuts if Henry's going to call every time he has a 7, which I believe Henry is, right? He's just going to be like, oh, I mean, sometimes I'm coolered. Too bad. Wesley 3-bet pre-flop. He doesn't have queen jack that often. And he bet the flop. It's not that frequent that he has queen jack. I have to call with a 7.
Right.
And the real problem with the play is that Henry has a lot of 7s, like we said. Like, how many combos of 7s does Henry have? He is 10-7 suited, 9-7 suited, 8-7 suited, 7-7, 6-7 suited. That's quite a few.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
And by the way, Henry has almost no queen jack. I don't know. It just feels like a lot. And because of our image, Henry might call with hands that aren't a 7 also. Yeah. Right. And that starts to become problematic. And as Henry, we might sit there and think, is Wesley really going to go for the check raise on the river where I have so many check backs? Like, all my 10s are just checking back on this river, as we've talked about. Like, they're not going to bet for value, right? All the 1-pair hands are checking back. Is Wesley not just going to bet with Wesley's image to try and get called by those hands instead of going for some fancy play? Like, he's mostly going to bet with that, I would think. Not, of course, I'm sure he'll have some plays with value here, but the cool fancy play is the check raise, and Wesley's makes a lot of fancy plays.
I think Wesley did some analysis correctly in his head, and he got caught up in the things that he wanted to be true, right. Which was, he could see that he was losing. He's like, okay, I'm a good enough player. I can see that I'm losing. What do I do with that? Oh, I have 2 cards that block the nuts. What do I do with that? I'm losing and I have 2 cards that block the nuts. I guess I should raise. But he didn't think about how frequently he's going to get called easily by how many combos whenever Henry has a 7.
Yeah.
So I think he stopped short of thinking about and I'm guilty of this sometimes too, where I have like a particular outcome I want from a hand. So I kind of lean into the analysis that supports my hypothesis, So I think that might be what happened.
And putting a guy in a hand you can beat. I mean, we've been all doing that since 2004, right? I mean, that's a classic move. I mean, on one level, I guess you could, if you're Wesley, you could say, I mean, this is one of the better hands I have for bluffing with, right? Like, there's very few hands that have 2 blockers in them that are significant. This is one of them. That's pretty great. The problem is that, I mean, having a 7 is a straight anyway, so I guess that isn't a blocker, right? So having a jacks and queens are really the only blockers. So you could say this is as good as it gets for a blocker. Yeah. But it still feels like ambitious, like overly ambitious, again, with his particular reputation and the fact that when Henry bets, he always has better than 1-pair hand. So we're attacking a stronger range, and with our bad reputation, I just don't know that it's going to work enough. And like we said, Henry 100% can have a 7. He's not going to fucking fold.
Right. On some boards, with the way it ran out and the way the betting has been, even if you have literally the best bluffing hand in your hand, and I think Wesley does, except for the suit not being perfect, but it's close. It's still not a plus EV play, and it's not even plus EV metagame, because you can find other spots where you can bluff. You don't have to bluff every opportunity that you get. Yeah. So,
I mean, there are other things in play. Like, Henry's bet size is a reason to attack. I will say that. And the fact that we have 2 jacks means it's harder for Henry to have some of the hands we do have ideal blockers, and the bet size. You could put that together, I guess, and say like, he's just going to fold enough of the time that this is probably printing some level of value here. I just feel like there's so many better spots, so many better things we can do. I just don't know that we need to go for it here. I just feel like maybe I'm being overly cautious though, as I'm sort of talking myself into that 25K bet size. I don't know if Henry's been paying attention though. Maybe he knows if you bet small, Wesley might attack it, and then we'll go back to that humiliate him into raising thing. This isn't even that small, but 30% pop.
No. Anyway, Henry goes into the tank for a long time.
Yeah,
and
good.
It would be so much easier if he just had a 7, right? You could just flick the chip in and be like, did I win? I hope I won.
Yeah. Yeah. Are we chopping? We're chopping, maybe? Mm-hmm. Sometimes? I don't know. Yeah.
But I don't know, Wesley is repping. I guess Wesley could have a 7 and play it this way, right? I think he could.
I don't know if he would, but he could,
Let's just forget about that, because you're really focused on that on both of these hands. So let's assume that he could, right? Like if it's possible.
Okay.
Like he could have ace 7 suited that had a backdoor draw on the flop potentially. I mean, it's a lot to ask, but it's possible. He could have queen jack and have just gone for it on the dry flop and then picked up the perfect turn card and continued. That's reasonable.
Yeah, that's right.
The tough part of that story is the preflop thing. Like the preflop plus flop winnows down those queen jack combos pretty narrow to me.
I agree. Sometimes, but not that often. Is he going to have queen jack there?
The thing that argues so much. The thing that argues for fold for Henry is distribution. If he's not going to make exploitative plays, which it might be exploitative to call here, I'm not sure yet, but we don't have that high in our distribution. Obviously, we have a lot of sevens in our range, which we talked about. So we could just have an easy call with all of our sevens. I don't know if we need this hand in our calls if we're going to have enough of a calling range.
Yeah, I mean, what other two pair hands are we betting? Do we have that we're betting? We're betting, I think, all our two pair hands when check too. Right?
Yeah.
So there are some, but there's not like a huge amount.
6-8 suited, 10-9 suited.
9-8
10-9 might
suited.
raise the turn. 10-9 might raise the turn.
Oh yeah, 10-9 might raise the turn. That's a good point. Okay. So this is like this is the best two pair hand we have mostly, but we have way better hands than this too, as clearly, right? We have a few sets. We clearly have a 7 a bunch of the time. Yeah. So distribution probably argues for this to be a fold, and we don't block anything for sure, which sort of sucks too. Right?
Yeah. I think it's a really close spot for Henry with this hand. I think maybe this should work for Wesley, even though I think it's a bad play by Wesley. I think he just found one of Henry's hands, and it's possible. We were talking about live reads on this podcast. It's possible that Wesley's good with live reads, and that was a piece of it. You know, if we're going to give Wesley maximum credit for this play, we can say he had 3 factors going for him. He had Henry's sizing, he had the nut blockers, and he had a physical tell on Henry that told him that Henry was uncomfortable. You know, if he had all of that together, then maybe he just knows that Henry doesn't have a 7 very often at all. And,
and really can't call.
And then it's a good play if that's the case. Without that piece, I don't think it's a good play.
Yeah, I have to say, I've come around a little bit on the play, even before that, just with like the sizing and the story, and like Henry doesn't really have Queen Jack anyway. We block it too, of course. I don't know. Maybe it's okay to do it. Maybe it's okay, but certainly if there's any kind of live read or a sizing tell, if Henry's going to bet bigger with his better hands, like if he's always going to bet more with the 7, which he might, then like, yeesh, then like
well,
we
if
should
Henry's always
attacking
gonna,
theirs.
It depends on what type of player Henry is. Because if Henry's a good player who is actually balanced, who's always going to bet more with the 7, but bet this size with his 2 pairs, then he's going to call with this hand because it's his best 2 pair.
Right. Oh, that's a great point. I think you're giving that's asking a lot.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. Yeah. It's weird. You know, it feels like Henry could have won this hand so many different ways and so many different times, right? Like he could have won, maybe not on the flop, but on the turn if he raised, he probably just wins right there. If he checks back the river, which is not unreasonable to do, we think he has to go for value probably, but it's okay to check back the river there. If you don't think aces are going to call, you just get to win. And if you bet and call the raise, you get to win. The only way you lose this hand is if you bet the river and then fold to a raise. That's the only way he's going to lose.
Which is what he ultimately does. He tanks forever, makes the sad fold, and Wesley. I think this is the worst of the 2 plays we just did of Wesley making essentially the same play on the river. But this is the one that he wins and he loses the other one. But that's just how it goes sometimes.
I mean, you can see how Wesley is a little tough to play against. And you have to sort of, I think you should be deciding with Wesley before you bet the river what your plan is if he's going to raise you. You should already know that. And maybe that means you bet the river a little bit less of the time because there's a lot of spots where you want to make sure you get to showdown. You have to be a little less thin. But you make up for that money that you missed on those bets because when he raises, you're calling more and you pick off more bluffs.
Yeah. Well, it was a cool hand.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, you know, good job to everybody for making enjoyable poker content. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant.
Music is my sunlight, and all I need is one mic. And I can show every single MC how it's done right. Every time I come by, I'm bound to leave them tongue-tied. I'm sipping on liquor, a quitter is what I'm not. We got one life, and I took a minor break, but I'm back to claim the throne. And gonna be traveling the globe, and still have time to make it home. And you gon' meet